I'm Lauren from Beltline to Broadway, and I'm with Alex Matsuo. And the beauty of vaccination is we can be in person again. Um, and we are coming to you live from my family room, which we'll explain in a little while. But first, and if you can't hear me because I'm rigged up a little bit differently tonight, just let us know and we will change it. But we've got a mic, so hopefully everybody can hear us. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Lauren.
This is very cool. Congratulations. Alex just got engaged. Very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. Yay.
So we spoke once before, and it's crazy, but it's been a year.
Has it really?
I think it's been like since last, according to my thing, it said like March, but I was like, March sounds like too far away.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while
since we spoke last. And I think we spoke on Instagram. So for people who did not tune into that Instagram live, Alex is an actor and an author. But what I find perhaps most interesting is you are a paranormal investigator. And so tell us, for people who didn't tune into the last live, how did you get into that?
Yeah, so I had experiences when I was a kid. One of my first experiences happened when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I was really intrigued. I was terrified, but intrigued. I was like, oh, this is cool. But I grew up in a very conservative Christian household, and anything spooky, ghosts was not allowed. But of course, when you tell that to a kid, what they want to do is explore that more. So I was kind of doing this secret underground, like ghost research type of thing on the side. Like I would read books at school, but I would dog ear the books and keep them in the library. I wouldn't take them home. I brought home one Goosebumps book one time and my mom flipped out. Like literally nothing spooky or weird was allowed. And it wasn't until I was old enough to drive that I was able to go out and explore. Like after my mom went to bed, I would get my car and go to Old Town San Diego and go to like the Whaley House and the cemetery like a block away, and I would try to talk to ghosts.
And when you were a kid, did you have any experiences that kind of let you know that you had a gift for this?
You know, it's interesting because after my first experience, I wanted to have more, but I wasn't really getting more experiences because I couldn't really go out and investigate. But one of the next experience I had was actually a theater. I was doing a production of Peter Pan in this beautiful old theater in downtown San Diego. It's the Spreckles Theater, and or opened in the early 1900s. Gorgeous facility. And the way that the dressing rooms work is the dressing rooms were backstage and up a floor. And it was children's theater. And, you know, it was one of those things where it's a big cast. You got to know what the costume plots were pretty quickly because it's Peter Pan. I mean, it's Peter Pan. You get to know everyone in the cast. And so when I went out for places, I saw a ballerina stretching on the railings on the second floor, and she was just stretching, doing like pink tights, black leotard, hair in a bun. And I looked at her and I'm like, okay, well, we're at places. Why aren't you in your costume? And two, I don't recognize you, but okay. Like I thought it was weird. And I looked away and then I looked back and she was gone. So, and there is a story that there was a ballerina who had died at the Spreckles Theater after falling down the stairs from that backstage area to the stage. Right on the railing where she was stretching. So yeah.
Wow. And that doesn't freak you out?
Initially it did, but again, it was that, oh, weird, cool.
So when I think of paranormal investigators, and when my husband, I'm going to throw him under the bus because we actually have a studio audience tonight. My daughter and husband are on the other side of the camera. You can't see them. But think of Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
So is it like Ghostbusters, or does Ghostbusters completely, what Grant was saying, my husband, before we went on air, was real paranormal investigators probably hate Ghostbusters.
It's actually quite the opposite. Paranormal investigators love Ghostbusters.
Really?
So the opening shot of the movie where you see Bill Murray doing like the card test with, the different subjects, those are actually real. They're called Zener cards. And the Rhine Research Center in Durham, North Carolina, is a parapsychology research center, and they do experiments with like Zener cards and psychic mediumship and strange phenomenon. They do that sort of research. Now we don't have proton packs, and we can't put ghosts in a box. If we could put ghosts in a box, we would be so happy. But a lot of paranormal investigators, especially like the older ones, came from Ghostbusters. And Dan Aykroyd's family is actually a family of paranormal researchers. His father,
Wow.
I think his name is Peter Aykroyd. I think he was a very well known psychical researcher. So Dan Aykroyd wrote that based on his family and his family research and history.
See, everyone, film trivia night, you guys have it covered, because this is great.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So now I will look at the movie, I guess, a little bit differently.
Yeah. I think Dan Aykroyd's brother, or it could have been his father too, wrote a book about paranormal research as well. The name of it escapes me at the moment, but there is a book out there. If you look up like Aykroyd paranormal, like if you Google it, you should be able to find it. But yeah, Dan Aykroyd comes from a legacy of paranormal researchers.
Wow. So it kind of makes sense that he would want to not only make Ghostbusters funny, but kind of get parts of it right.
Yeah,
so
he did get some of it right. Yeah.
So okay. So last time we spoke, and I'm sure this is the number one question you get asked, but since, for the sake of being a theater podcast, theaters in North Carolina, are there haunted theaters among us? Last time we talked about the Paris Opera House. We posted pictures of the Paris Opera House after our chat because people were really interested, kind of the Phantom of the Opera story. But anyway, what about theaters in North Carolina?
There are some haunted theaters in North Carolina, especially there's a couple in Raleigh. I can't really say them by name because I haven't gotten permission to do so, but you know which ones because I've told you.
Lips are sealed.
Lips are sealed. Yeah, I do know that the Temple Theater in Sanford has, I don't have ties with them, so sorry. They're reported to be haunted. There's a couple, like, if you think of the buildings that have a lot of history to them, the buildings that are older, they may have associations with like war, or they might be on property that's very historic with some traumatic history. That should help you all narrow it down a bit. So, and there's a couple of haunted theater. Well, I know of one haunted theater in Durham for sure that we're trying to work on getting into. It's just never worked out. It's just never worked out timing wise. But yeah, so they're around. They're around.
And we did get confirmation. So if anybody watched our my interview with Mike Anthony, who works at the Richard Rogers Theater, last time we spoke, we talked about the fact that it was rumored that the Richard Rogers Theater was haunted. And Mike, who has worked there for 14 years, kind of confirmed that. He had not had any experiences, but he had heard of people who had experiences.
Yeah.
So very kind of interesting. Okay, so we are in my family room talking about places that are haunted. We're in my family room because, hello, Dara. Thank you. Yes, she is a local YouTuber, and she also happens to be really nice. So she's local YouTuber, author, and Dara is watching us from Facebook. So thank you for tuning in,
Dara.
Okay, so we are in my family room because several months ago we had kind of a freaky thing happen. This couch is always here, and there is a door behind the couch that leads to our screened patio. And we have not opened this door for, I don't know, 20 years because there is another door that leads to the patio from our kitchen, and that's how we get to the patio. So this door was open one night in the middle of the night. Couch had been moved into the middle of the room. There's an ottoman on the other side of the camera that you can't see, but the top of the ottoman was off. We use it for storage of some barbecue supplies. And there was a drawer that had been open. Of course, called the police because we immediately thought we had had a break in. However, there was no evidence of a break in. Both my kids were asleep upstairs. On the other side of this door is a small table on the patio, and that table had not been moved or rummaged or displaced or tipped over or anything. So I asked Alex to come over tonight, and she brought some of her equipment, and hopefully none of it goes off while we are.
What would you do if it did?
I would be like, okay, Alex, tell me more. Because, I'm like morbidly curious.
Like, what do I do next?
So what happens now? So tell me what you brought. And then I guess, we cannot be the only house in North Carolina where people think they've had hauntings or sightings. So if you suspect, like we suspect, because we ruled everything else out. So if you suspect that something happened in your home, what do you do?
Well, first thing is don't panic. Don't panic. And, think about things that could be happening in your life at the moment. Like, like I asked you before we started, like, did anyone pass recently? I was going to ask too, like, any significant anniversaries around this time, going through any periods of extreme stress, things like that. And you definitely did the right thing in trying to debunk everything first. That's a step that I feel like a lot of our clients forget to do is, hey, you should probably rule out everything first, because otherwise, like if someone was having electrical issues, I would say, did you have an electrician check it out? Things like that, because we don't want to validate someone's paranoia, so to speak. Right. So we definitely are super careful about that. And I recommend, if you don't know what you're doing, don't try spirit communication on your own, because you could make things worse. We bring in a medium, just be very careful, vet the medium first, make sure that they're open to being debunked and that kind of thing. But my team, we don't charge to work investigations. We volunteer our time. We actually pay to be a part of the team to help pay the bills and everything. But we're just very passionate about helping people from a consultative approach, like we'll help you figure out what's going on. And then depending on what you want to do, like if you want to get rid of it, we'll basically counsel you through that process to see if that's something you really want. And also just how to set boundaries too. And that's something you could do without even calling a team. It's, setting those boundaries of, you can't scare me, you can't be negative towards me, that kind of thing. So,
but yeah. I guess, when you think of, because of movies like Ghostbusters or some of the horror movies that we've seen, it's natural to think ghosts are bad or negative or out to get you. Not always the case, right? Right.
And a lot of times I say think of them as people, but I know some random person coming into your home and knocking and making noises can be just as freaky. But they are people too. So, and it can be easy to think like, oh, they're out to get me, they're trying to hurt me. But a lot of times that's not the case, especially if you live in an older home. You may have the original owner popping in on occasion just to see how the house is doing. And do you want to say, get out to the original owner of the house? They're going to say,
yeah, this is my house.
This is my house. What are you talking about?
Wow. Okay, so Dara has a question.
Yes.
Favorite Raleigh haunted spots.
Ooh.
And we should say, as a precursor to this, We do not encourage, not that you would do this, Dara, but we do not encourage trespassing.
Right.
And every place you go, you and your team have permission to go to. So
Yeah.
we're going to preface it by saying that.
Yeah, favorite Raleigh spot. Well, there's a few. Dick's Park is definitely got some stuff going on, and it's the location of the old mental hospital. There's a lot of rumors and speculations about, oh, the patients escaped and went to the Catholic orphanage nearby and burnt down the Catholic orphanage, and that stuff's not true. It's Raleigh's Crybaby Lane. There is some weird stuff around Crybaby Lane, which is on the Dick's Park near the Dick's Park property. So that whole area right there is a bit strange. Pullen Park is also a bit weird too, with the carousel and everything. So I don't know if it's hanging on to like residual energy from when the carousel was like more active and in the state fairgrounds. Maybe I can say the Rose Garden because even though it's right next to RLT, the Rose Garden does have some weird things happening too. So those are probably my favorites around Raleigh. So.
And any cemeteries that like Oakwood. I mean, I would think that Oakwood is just a treasure trove because there's so many historic historic graves there.
There are. Oakwood's not very open to their paranormal side though.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's
all right.
So that would be it. So yeah.
Yeah, don't go there.
Don't go to Oakwood. Don't go to Oakwood. It's also, I think it's privately owned. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Don't do that one. But City Cemetery has some pretty interesting ghost stories with that too. And City Cemetery is the oldest cemetery in Raleigh. Okay. And a lot of Raleigh's founders are buried there. There's an actual slave section of the cemetery that's sadly pretty neglected. Oberlin Cemetery behind Interact also has some interesting energies there. That one, Friends of Oberlin, it's a nonprofit that's dedicated to bringing that cemetery back to its splendor. Donate money to them. Like seriously, they, any support they can get is great. Now the creamery building off of Glenwood near downtown Raleigh, over by where the Hampton is, the Hibernian, the creamery where Shoko restaurant used to be. So Raleigh had its own Jack the Ripper in the early 90s.
See, nobody knows this stuff.
Raleigh had its own Jack the Ripper in the early to mid 90s. There was a man who had been
18 or 19?
1990s, yeah.
Again, studio audience tonight.
Yeah, the 1990s. And there was a man, I believe his name was John Williams. He's still alive and he's on death row right now. He was a serial killer who was murdering prostitutes. And one of them was found in the bay window in the bay area of where Shoko was, the restaurant. There was another victim who was basically found in pieces on the railroad track behind the building. And yeah, it was pretty intense. And that restaurant, so the women's restroom in that restaurant had a presence in there, a male presence. And we got that more as like a protective thing. We think there was maybe some residual energy from when these women were being murdered. Now the restaurant wasn't functioning when these murders were happening. It was just the old creamery building, because I think at that time it was emptied. I think it was empty. Like I think it was owned, but it wasn't being used. And so when we were there trying to investigate and communicate, we kept getting screams on our ghost box. And ghost box is a radio sweep, and they were very distinct screams. So and we sweep on AM, so
people can see that, right?
Yeah, we have that on YouTube, on my team's YouTube channel.
So we will share that after, because I know the last time you were on After Torn, Juan and I hung out with Alex online, and she was telling us some of these stories, and we watched the video, which is really.
And Juan about freaked out.
Yeah, Juan is not going ghost hunting anytime soon. So when you go to a place like the old creamery building, how much research do you do beforehand? How much investigation do you do beforehand into the history of
Yeah, so I do a lot of research. For me personally, I do a lot of research beforehand. I want to know the ins and outs of what happened at the building, when was it built, why was it built, what businesses were there. I want a timeline. Now, I do have other people on the team who don't want to know that history, especially if they have abilities like psychic abilities, just so that they know whatever they get is coming from somebody, from spirit and not from me, right. Or anyone else. And I do have a few investigators who'd rather not know the history either, just so that so that they're not putting an intention out there of like, oh, I want to find a ghost. Oh, hey, there's a ghost. But wait, it's coming from my own expectation. Right. So we basically keep me or another person completely in the know with the history. So that if we have, like at Shoko, we had one of the victims come through. Her name was Deborah. I was able to continue that conversation because I know what happened to Deborah.
So when you do make contact, talk to me about the communication process. Are you talking to them like you and I are talking now? Or how does that work?
Yeah. So it depends. The way we open our investigations is we introduce ourselves. We also try to share a little bit about our story every time we investigate. Now, this is a fairly new thing that we started doing because we want to be inclusive and basically boost the signal to any spirits around us that we want to try to communicate, including those who may have a unique history that may not be in the history books, specifically like LGBTQ spirits. There are queer spirits out there, and so we'll basically share little tidbits about ourselves, and then we just kind of open the floor. We just open the floor and just see what happens. And if we start getting a response, we'll say, "Oh, hello, what's your name?" And we'll do like the introductions, like, how old are you? Are you male or female? Or sometimes we don't get anything, but then we'll say, or we'll say something like, did you see yourself as both, or did you see yourself as neither? And sometimes we get in really interesting responses. And yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah. And we'll always say like, well, we can't see you right now. We can't hear you. So please don't take offense to our questions. It's just, this is our way of communication. So
right.
Yeah. So we'll do it that way.
Okay. Talk to me about the doll.
Oh, Madison, I should have brought her tonight.
Oh no, I'm so glad. There's only so much I can take.
Things start flying in the room, and
there's only so much we can handle. For those of you who follow Alex on YouTube, before we went live, you were live with another stream about this doll. So tell us about this.
Yeah, so I got Madison off of eBay because that's where all haunted items come from. I had been wanting to get a haunted doll for a while. A lot of big paranormal influencers have been buying haunted dolls because it's the cool thing to do right now. And I'm like, maybe I want a haunted doll. And I talked to my fiance about it first because, obviously if I brought in like the spawn of Hades, not saying Hades is bad, but still, bringing in anything, I wanted to make sure my fiance was on board with it.
He was okay with it
because it would affect him too. So I basically just went on eBay, and it was interesting though, because when I saw Madison's picture, her hair was brown. And I was like, oh, she looks nice. And the little things about her was, she belonged to a family where the matriarch's name was Madison, and she loved to bake. And so that's where the doll got her name from. Basically, Madison is activated when you bake or cook something because she likes the smells. So I was like, okay, a haunted doll that likes carbs. My girl. Okay. So I paid my money, and I tried not to spend more than like $50 on her because I'm like, if she's on haunted, then I spend like $100 on a doll that's not haunted, which sucks. But it happens. So low stakes as possible. So she arrived, and I opened her up and realized her hair was red, and I'm like, that's weird. And even my fiance was like, she looks like you. I'm like, she does look like me.
She does. We'll post a picture. Too.
Yeah, we'll post
the YouTube link so people can see it.
Yeah. I was like, okay. So anyway, so the first week was fairly quiet, like, and I'm looking at her and I'm like, okay, maybe I did buy just a regular doll. But then some weird things started happening. Specifically, my boyfriend, well, he was my boyfriend at the time, now he's my fiance. Still getting used to the new terminology. And he was laying in bed one day. He was laying on his stomach. So, and he was like, he wasn't laying like his head on the pillow. He was laying across the bed. So here's the pillows, here's his head. And he feels, we have 4 cats. So we know what cats feel like when they jump on us. So he thought it was one of the cats jumping on the bed, jumped onto the bed, and he was not looking, but he's like, the cat is walking, walks on his back, and then walks back to the side, and he reaches his hand over to go pet the cat, and there's no cat there. And he looks, he's like, okay. And so then but he didn't feel the cat jump off the bed, nothing. So he puts his head back to the side, and the walking starts again. But when an animal jumps onto a bed, you can feel it. And at this point, he was hyper aware, and he felt the footsteps, the little footsteps again. And he looks, there's nothing there. And that was when he called me into the room, and I was like, hey, what's up? And he's like, I don't know if it's the doll, but there's something weird going on. And I don't know if he'll appreciate me saying this on a live stream, but my fiance tends to fart when he's scared. That's a self-defense mechanism.
And that's how you know your marriage is going to work right there.
Because I walked in and I smelled sulfur, and I said, okay, what did I bring into this apartment? And he's like, no, that was me. I got scared. So
sorry, Chris.
So I actually did a whole TikTok video of like, hey, funny story. And then I have my camera on Madison. I'm like, stop making my boyfriend fart.
See, you gotta have fun.
Yeah, you gotta setting those boundaries. So and there'd be like weird things happening, like we'd hear footsteps in the apartment, and we do have a resident ghost in our apartment already. His name is Frank. He haunts my kitchen. He doesn't really walk around though. He doesn't like it when things are on the breakfast bar, and he'll push them off the breakfast bar. Like we've watched like a loaf of bread go. Yeah.
Oh, really?
And we're like, oh, Frank doesn't like the bread.
He doesn't like the bread.
He doesn't like the bread there. Sorry, Frank. But he's fairly low key. But and he'll like make the toaster go off, and he'll clink like Chris's beer bottles. Like it's really funny. Like we joke that, oh, Frank wants to do a toast or cheers, But but we've had footsteps around the apartment, and then I did what we call a Phasma box session. It's a noise generating app that puts out random sounds. Mm-hmm. And so I did a Phasma box session with her, and had some interesting things pop up, but I said, hey, Madison, what's my name? And you heard Alex, and then and I was like, oh, cool. Then you heard Catherine, and I freaked out because Catherine's my first name. Wow. And I was like, no. I was like, what? And I also did like, hey, Madison, how many fingers? And she's like 2, and you can hear all of this. And it's the first video I did with Madison. I just released one tonight where I did another session with her. Because I had a really freaky dream last week of this shriveled old woman. And I've had stress dreams about the wedding. Like,
that will not.
I know it's not going to go away anytime soon.
Will not go away.
It's not going away anytime soon. But I was actually sitting in a theater, and the shriveled up old woman like grabs my shoulders and just goes like sucking the life out of me type of thing. And I went, no, Madison, don't do that. So for some reason I knew it was Madison, and then she spat on me in my dream, and I'm like, no, we don't do that. But for some reason I was like, I knew this was Madison, and I don't know. I knew Madison died at a very old age, so I don't know what's happening with that. But I did a Phasma box session with her, and I just released that tonight on my YouTube channel. And it's it was pretty weird. Pretty weird.
Really interesting. So Madison's a doll, obviously an object. Um, we watch Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which we love, and her father. Spoiler alert! If you don't watch Zoe's, her father passed away last season, and so she went to see a psychic, and they asked her to bring an object. Are spirits usually connected to objects like that?
It's a tricky area because I don't know how many conscious spirits are attached to items really, unless it really meant something to them. I think there can be like residual energy, like meaning, my glasses, if a psychic were to touch my glasses, they'd probably pick up on my energy, my personality, but it wouldn't be me. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm attached to my glasses. They could probably pick up like, oh, I see a woman with red hair, and I see
like
a lot of
like almost colors. Like you think of color, like when I think of energy, I think of colors. For whatever reason.
Like even personality traits, like, oh, I see a lot of cats, or I hear cackling laughter, that kind of thing. But it wouldn't be me like, oh, a psychic just picked up my glasses, I need to go. Unless that's how it works. I don't know. Ghost theory 101. I don't know. So in terms of like a conscious spirit attached to a doll, I almost feel like if there's somebody looking for a haunted doll, like I was, there may be a spirit that's like, hey, let's hitch a ride on this object, and and let's see what happens.
Like the ghosts at the Haunted Mansion in Disney World.
Yeah,
like hitchhiking
ghosts. Yeah. Well, and I think too, when you're out there wanting to communicate with spirits, I think that does put like a Vegas sign over your head saying, hey, they want to talk to you. And if there are spirits who are maybe lonely, or they're trying to find someone to talk to or somebody to hear them, I don't know what it's like on the other side. But if they see that Vegas sign, they're going to be like, hey, I'm going to go talk to this person. So
can we talk about the equipment?
Yeah.
I feel like, I think it's really fascinating. So
definitely.
We have equipment on the table and kind of scattered, and can we just pick it up? I don't even know.
That's fine. Yeah.
So Alex shows the equipment.
So this here, as you can see, it doesn't go off unless I put my hand to it. So it's basically like motion activated, so to speak. So if we're using, it's called an octo red pod, but other people know it in the ghost world as REM pod. So we may say something like, hey, if you're here with us, you see this long silver stick, go, because we don't, if they're from like the Revolutionary War, they're probably going to look at this and think witchcraft. So
what is that?
Yeah. So we might say like, hey, can you touch the stick, and you can see it's going off. It'll go off. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So this rarely goes off, but also the ghost of Gettysburg did mess it up a little bit.
I was going to say, it's going off right now, Alex, and that's
we're good.
Okay,
we're good. And
that's crazy Gettysburg ghosts.
I know, right? So this is a infrared thermometer. So oftentimes, if we're investigating, people will say they feel cold. What we'll do is we'll turn it on, and basically, you can get my temperature off of that. So that's
similar to the ones that we're like being zapped on the forehead.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly what this is. So now it's like, oh, this is for like, taking temperature, but and then this isn't just a basic audio recorder, and I have mine on right now. So if there's any spirits that wants to say anything, we tell them to go to the orange light, and you could talk to us from there. And then back here is the K2 meter. This is probably the most popular piece of ghost hunting equipment. It actually detects electromagnetic fields. It's believed that ghosts are tied with electromagnetic fields. Like there'll be spikes on this meter. The only downside to it is if you're using electronics, it's going to go off.
Okay.
So you have to be
like
really
it was going earlier.
Yeah, it was. So here it's going off here. But it's not a ghost. It's the router.
It's the router.
It's the router. So then it's just minor adjustment, move it away from the router, and we're good. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. I'm so, I teeter on being fascinated and being frightened.
Yeah.
By this, as we spoke about in the last investigation, or in the last time we spoke, in the last interview, I was saying to you, how would we know that the spirits are there? And you said if the glasses are moved or the glasses fall or something like that. And I was like, if the glasses fall, I am out the door. So, but I do think it's kind of fascinating. And and it's funny, my daughter asked me earlier before we went on, she was like, do you believe in this stuff, Mom? And I was like, I have no reason not to believe in it. So there's nothing to me to, I'd love to think that our loved ones are watching over us.
Yeah.
So where you're going, let's talk about this weekend because this is very exciting. People can kind of watch.
People can watch.
Yep. So you're going to USS North Carolina. Have you been there before?
I have, yes. This will be my second time investigating the ship.
Very cool. So do you have, I guess when you go into it, do you go into it with objectives, or do you just go in kind of just open to whatever's going to happen?
So the first time we went, we actually came dressed in period clothing. All the women dressed up. We dressed up in period clothing, and we find that depending on how we approach the ship when we enter it, it's going to affect how the spirits interact with us. So when we got onto the ship and we were wearing like vintage clothing from World War II, what was interesting was we were getting a lot of flirtatious interaction, like skirts were being flipped, and the male spirits are being very sweet on us, with our equipment. We do have more voice activated stuff, but they didn't want to talk about the war with us at all, which contextually that would make sense. They wouldn't talk about it with the women. This time around, because I've been doing a lot of research on queer hauntings and such. I want to see if maybe, you have a battleship full of sailors in the 1940s. What are the odds? And, queerness didn't just start in the 21st century, So, and also we find that the idea of queer spirits it's very like not talked about, like why should it matter and all this stuff. And I feel like we have this silent group of spirits that haven't been able to interact with anyone that understands them or tells their story or can relate to them. And half of my team is queer. So I really want to take that approach with the ship this time around. And I do have a couple of male queer men coming this time around too. So they don't know it yet unless one of them's watching. But I want to see if we can get some interaction there too, just to see like, hey, I'm like you, I want to hear your story. I understand where you're coming from. And just really showing a lot of empathy of like, can you imagine being LGBTQ during World War II in the 40s
on a ship
full of very like men,
So if you hear any stories while you're there, then what? How are they documented? What happens to the stories once they're shared with you?
So what we'll do is we usually try to ask for permission from the spirits, just saying, hey, I'm sure there are others who would love to hear your story. Yeah, because consent is still valid even after you die. But if names pop up, we'll try to cross-reference the names to see if we've had it happen before where we'll pick up on a name and then we do research and then it's like, oh, there they are. There's their picture. Holy cow. So we'll do research and then we usually try to compile it into like a blog that we'll put on our website, or I'll write about it in one of my books. So we do try to tell the story in some capacity because we think, taking a note from Hamilton, who lives, who dies, who tells your story.
Who tells your story?
Yep.
Speaking of stories, did you publish a book? Is this my imagination over this pandemic?
Not since the pandemic. I'm working on a book right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm working on a book. I'm working on a new book. It's actually more of a memoir of my paranormal adventures throughout my life and how I found myself through ghost hunting. So it's going to be a little bit of a different book than I usually write.
Is ghost hunting somewhat of a catharsis for you?
I think so. Actually, one of my friends in the UK, she has her PhD in the psychology of EVP, psychology of electronic voice phenomenon. So psychology and like ghost hunting and all that stuff. And she said something really interesting that really stuck out to me is how we may not even realize it, but we use ghost hunting to process trauma. And using ghost hunting to process really tough chapters in history, like Civil War sites and Revolutionary War sites. Just kind of process our acceptance of it, or just processing the fact that it happened, that kind of thing. And I think, and that was really huge for me, because I knew I've been processing my own grief through ghost hunting, because I lost very important people in my life from a young age. And I think this is my way of trying to find, not necessarily find them, so to speak, but trying to make my peace with death, and at least some reassurance that we do go on after our physical body is done.
And I think so many of us who've lost people close to us, we want to believe that.
Yeah,
that's something we hang on to.
Yeah.
So
I mean, just like how we use theater to process major things in our lives. I mean, there are millions of people out there I almost said hundreds. There's a lot more than that. But there's millions of people out there doing that through ghost hunting.
Yeah. Interesting. See, the more I talk to you, the more interested I am. Not as interested to go to the USS North Carolina, but we'll get there. Bucket list places where you'd like to do an investigation?
Ooh, I totally don't mean this in a political matter at all, but I want to investigate the White House.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Apparently Lincoln's in the White House. Apparently he's still around. And I kind of wonder if Martha Washington might be there too, after what Melania did to her garden.
That would be a conversation to have.
Anyway, I used to not to be political, I promise. Yeah, but the White House apparently has some really interesting activity. The Richard Rogers, I'd love to be able to get in there.
Hey, Mike Anthony, if you're watching, hook us up.
Right, especially right now with Broadway being closed, it's the perfect time. Just go to New York and put me in all.
Go to New York
and
Richard Rogers.
Put me in, like, there's a few others too, the Palace, and there's a bunch. I'm like, oh, again, you're not using that building for anything right now.
Let me in.
It's been this one's been in the news all over the place right now, but the Cecil Hotel, mainly because I want to be able to debunk the ideology that there are demons in the Cecil Hotel, because I don't believe there's demons in there at all. Those are my bucket list items right now.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to keep posted. Well, I'll put all the links. If you're tuning in late, I will put all the links to Alex's website, to her Facebook page, to the YouTube channel, so you can keep up with her. You'll be broadcasting live from the USS North Carolina,
yes,
so people can follow it. This weekend.
Yep. We're going to start the first video at 9. We haven't really come up with a plan of, we've noticed if we've tried to structure it out, it never works out. So it's like, we'll start at 9, just follow our page. We'll pop up and say, hey, we're going to go live in 30 minutes, that kind of thing. But we're definitely going to go live at 9 p.m. this Saturday, just to say, hey, and maybe we'll do a rough tour, but I feel like it's going to be me going around the ship going, here's the mess hall. Because there's a lot of steps.
If you've taken the tour,
there's a lot of steps. There's a lot of steps. Your thighs are burning afterwards.
Yeah, but I would imagine, I just would imagine it's fascinating.
Oh, it is.
If somebody's watching, maybe like Dara, who kind of gets a bug and says, I kind of like to try it. How do they get in touch with you? Can they be a part of your team? Can they go on a field trip with you to one of these investigations?
Yeah. So as the pandemic restrictions are lifting and we're able to slowly get back to normal, we are going to start doing more public events again, once people feel safe. And my team is going to be I think we're going to be completely vaccinated by this Saturday. But we're keeping it small. It's like we have 11 people. It's a big ship. So we can definitely,
spread out.
we can spread out. Now, if you have like 20, 30, 40 people, it's not quite so easy.
Yeah.
But as restrictions start to lift, we are going to consider opening up more investigation opportunities. So my team's page is Association of Paranormal Study. My brand is the spooky stuff, but if you contact me, I can connect you with my team.
Awesome.
I'm very much very passionate about educating the next generation of investigators. I do have a couple books out. One of them is called The Brave Mortal's Guide to Ghost Hunting, and that is your ghost hunting 101 book. So if you've watched the shows on TV or you're watching this live stream and you're like, I really want to try this out, but I have nowhere to start, The Brave Mortal's Guide to Ghost Hunting is a good place to start.
If you have any other questions, post them in the chat because we just got a few more minutes. So post them in the chat. I know it flies by. And I'm so grateful that we can be here in person.
Right.
Studio audience, do you have any questions, Zara?
No.
They sat here because they want to see if these machines are going to go off during this live
So far, so good, but that's a good thing.
I'm very disappointed, actually.
Well, they might take that as a challenge.
I hope they do.
Oh, there you go.
But it's very cool. I know, and I don't, boast any special powers or anything like that, but I know that there have been times when Grant and I first started dating. He lived in Tennessee, and we went to a lot of historic sites. As tourists, and there were several plantations we had gone to where I'd say, "Ooh, Grant, there's like some weird energy here or something." And so it's really interesting to me, and it's something I've always been fascinated about.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm very glad that you joined me in my home.
Yeah.
We'll keep you posted if once we go off air we hear or see anything on these devices. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Dara. Dara, for those of you who don't know House Page, you should go to House Page's website. Have you ever been to House Page's? Have you seen her armor fashion? It's really cool.
No.
I'll send you the link. But anyway, so thank you, Dara, for watching. Thank you, everyone else, for watching. And thank you, Alex, for coming to my house.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is
very cool. I feel like we're saying living room live, except it's, tomorrow or Wednesday, I'll be back in my studio and we'll be coloring Broadway. We'll be doing Wicked. I feel like the whole week is kind of spooky stuff, but we'll be doing a Wicked themed coloring night Wednesday night. So come back at 8:00 for that. And thank you so much. And then other than the USS North Carolina, anything else you've got going on, the podcast?
I have the Spooky Stuff podcast. That one I'm really focusing on putting the spotlight on marginalized groups in the paranormal. So investigators of color, LGBTQ, women, really showcasing what they're doing and the work they're doing. My latest podcast features Ken Summers, who is a paranormal researcher specializing in the LGBTQ plus community. And he has a book out called Queer Hauntings. And we really dove into how paranormal media is erasing queer history from these haunted locations.
Wow. So wherever podcasts are heard.
Yep.
And it's the Spooky Stuff podcast. All right. Well, thank you. This is awesome. Thank you all for watching, and we'll keep you posted on any strange phenomenons happening in my family room. But so far, it's been quiet, so that's good.
Usually, if you put cameras on them, they'll be like, "Ugh, camera shy."
Camera shy. All right. Well, once we turn the cameras off, we'll see what's happening. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Alex, for hanging out with me.
Thanks for having me.
And I will see you all Wednesday night. Bye, guys.
Bye.